Welcome to Wisdom for the Present, where we take ancient truth and bring it into clear, modern understanding. This episode uses AI-generated narration based on human-researched and written material.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, so I want to start by asking you, and really everyone listening to this, have you ever found yourself staring down a perfectly logical, rational path, like a career choice, a relationship, some major life decision where you knew exactly what you should do?
Right, the safe bet.
Exactly, the safe bet. And yet you felt this overwhelming, almost totally irrational pull to do the exact opposite.
I mean, absolutely, we all have.
Right. Have you ever watched yourself just actively dismantle your own stability simply because the gravitational pull of passion or ego or just sheer intoxicating desire was way too strong to resist?
Oh, yeah. It's like a train wreck you can't look away from, but you're driving the train.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're driving it. Well, today we are taking a deep dive into a collision of forces that feels incredibly urgent today, even though our source material for this is over 400 years old.
And detailing events from, over 2 millennia ago?
Yeah, exactly. 2,000 years. We are exploring the tension between duty and desire, between the rational mind and the consuming heart. And we're doing it through the lens of William Shakespeare's The Tragedy of Antony and Cleopatra.
Such an unbelievable text.
It really is. And as our guide for this deep dive, we are bringing in the brilliant and honestly often pretty provocative 19th century commentary of the essayist William Hazlitt.
Which is such a great pairing, by the way.
Totally. Because this isn't just a historical recap. It's not a textbook. We're looking at how high-level leaders navigate and, spectacularly fail at the management of their own internal chaos.
Yeah, it truly is one of the most profound psychological case studies ever written, I think.
Oh, for sure.
And what makes this specific analysis so compelling is Hazlitt's opening assertion. He doesn't just call this a great play.
Right.
He makes this incredibly bold claim that it is Shakespeare's finest historical play, period.
Which is a massive statement.
Huge. And he bases that on a really fascinating premise, which is that in this work, Shakespeare makes poetry and I'm quoting here, organ of history.
Okay, wait. I want to stop right there and unpack that phrase.
Yeah.
Because it sounds beautiful, but I want to make sure we actually understand the mechanics of it. Poetry is the organ of history.
Yeah, it's a bit dense.
Right. Because if we look at standard historical accounts, like the textbook versions of the Roman Empire, we get dates, troop movements, political treaties. We get the what?
The dry facts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Hazlitt is suggesting that poetry accomplishes something a textbook fundamentally cannot. So how exactly does a poetic structure act as an instrument or an organ of historical truth?
Well, it basically bypasses the purely rational filter. It implants the emotional reality of the era directly into your nervous system.
Oh, wow. Direct to the nervous system.
Yeah. Like, a historian can tell you that in 31 BC, the Roman Republic fractured because Mark Antony aligned with Egypt. But, that's just a sterile fact.
Right, doesn't make you feel anything.
Exactly. Hazlitt argues that history is not just made of treaties, it's made of human desires, terrors, hubris. So Shakespeare uses the mechanics of poetry, the meter, the rhythm, the sheer sensory overload of his metaphors to recreate the psychological environment of these people.
That makes total sense.
Hazlitt actually points out a specific line that captures this perfectly. It's where Shakespeare describes the tension of this moment, where the fate of the entire known world is suspended. He says it's like the swan's down feather that stands upon the swell at full of tide, and neither way inclines.
A swan's down feather. That image is just mathematically precise.
It really is.
Because a swan's down feather is practically weightless, right? It's resting on the swell at the absolute peak of high tide in that split second before the water decides to recede or push forward.
The equilibrium is perfect, but it's incredibly fragile.
Incredibly fragile. And that feather represents the entirety of the global power structure at the time. It is balancing right on the fault line between two massive, completely incompatible paradigms of human existence.
The ultimate clash of civilizations.
Yeah, because on one side you have Rome, and Rome represents structure, military discipline, stoicism, logic.
The rules.
Right, the rules. Mm-hmm. And on the other side we have Egypt, which in this text represents boundless indulgence, sensory richness, and just pure emotional volatility.
Exactly. This is the macro-level conflict of the whole text. Rome is the empire of the mind and the sword. It operates on this principle of virtus, the ancient Roman concept of manliness, duty, public virtue.
Right.
And Egypt operates on the principle of voluptas, which is pleasure, opulence, the private self. Hazlitt recognizes that Antony is the man pinned right at the fulcrum of this seesaw.
Yeah, he's the feather.
He is. He's this hardened Roman general who has just been entirely, completely seduced by the Egyptian ethos.
When I read Hazlitt's breakdown of this Roman-Egyptian divide, I immediately thought of the architecture of the human brain.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, it's the exact same conflict that plays out between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Right. Like, Rome is the prefrontal cortex. It handles long-term planning, impulse control, deferred gratification. It does the math.
It pays the taxes.
Exactly. And Egypt is the amygdala, the limbic system. It is immediate, emotional, deeply sensory, and it demands instant gratification right now.
That's a perfect analogy.
Thanks. So Antony's prefrontal cortex knows he must return to Rome to manage this massive geopolitical crisis. But his limbic system is entirely hijacked by Cleopatra.
Totally hijacked.
But, reading Hazlitt, I find myself questioning the play's ultimate moral stance here. Does Shakespeare actually condemn Antony's passion? Or is there a secret admiration for it?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right, because early in the text, Cleopatra asks Antony how much he loves her, and his response is, "There's beggary in the love that can be reckoned."
Man, there's beggary in the love that can be reckoned. It is just one of the most revealing lines in the entire play.
What does that mean exactly, to be reckoned?
Well, to reckon means to calculate, right? To measure, to balance a ledger. So Antony is saying that if you can put a boundary on your love, if you can quantify it like a Roman accountant, then your love is impoverished.
It's cheap.
Exactly. It is a beggar's love.
Mm-hmm.
True love, in his new Egyptian worldview, must defy all logic and all boundaries.
Yeah.
And to address your question about whether Hazlitt or Shakespeare condemns this, Hazlitt essentially argues that the sheer breathtaking beauty of the poetry prevents this from being a simple moralistic lecture.
Shakespeare isn't just wagging his finger at Antony saying, "Bad boy."
No, not at all. He is showing us the terrifying majesty of this kind of passion. However, the tragic mechanism is unavoidable. Like, if your worldview dictates that passion cannot be bounded or reckoned, it will inevitably dismantle the boundaries of your career, your identity, and your empire.
It's going to bleed into everything else.
Exactly.
And we watch that identity dismantle in real time. Like, there's a moment later in the play that Hazlitt elevates as one of the finest achievements in English literature.
Oh, the cloud scene.
Yes. Antony realizes his political power has evaporated, his military might is broken, and he's talking to his loyal servant, Eros. He looks up at the sky and starts describing the clouds. He compares his own sense of self to a dragonish cloud.
Yeah. He asks Eros if he's ever observed a cloud that assumes a distinct shape, like a dragon, a bear, a lion, or a pendant rock.
Right.
A cloud that looks as solid as a towered citadel, but then, the atmospheric pressure changes, a slight wind blows, and the cloud dislims.
Dislims. That's such a great word.
It's incredible. It unpaints itself, it loses its form, and becomes as indistinct as water is in water.
As water is in water.
Yeah. And Antony turns to his servant and says, "Now thy captain is even such a body." Hazlitt writes that this brilliantly captures the evanescent, fragile nature of human greatness.
That is heavy.
It really is. The towering achievements that we spend decades building, the titles, the wealth, the reputation, they look as solid as a citadel. But when they're subjected to the shifting winds of human passion and the erosion of time, they are entirely insubstantial.
The phrase dislims is just so haunting to me. It implies that his identity was only ever a painting to begin with, an illusion drawn on the sky.
Just a trick of the light.
Exactly. And to become as water is in water, that is the total dissolution of the ego. There's no separation, no boundary left.
It's terrifying, honestly.
It is chilling because it forces you to look at the fragile scaffolding of your own life. Like, if our identities are entirely tethered to external achievements or consuming relationships, how quickly could they dissolve if the wind shifted?
Very quickly.
Yeah. But to really grasp the magnitude of what Antony loses here, I feel like we need to establish exactly who he was before this dissolution began.
Oh, absolutely. The contrast is everything.
Right. We need to look at the Roman baseline. Who was Mark Antony before Egypt?
Well, it's essential context. At the opening of this narrative, Mark Antony is a triple pillar of the world. He is literally one of the three triumvirs who command the entire global Roman machine.
He's the boss.
He is the god of war made flesh. But our very first introduction to him is through the eyes of his own disgusted soldiers in Alexandria.
Oh, yeah. Philo.
Right. A soldier named Philo is watching Antony and just complaining bitterly. Philo remembers a time when Antony's eyes glowed like plated Mars over the battlefield.
Plated Mars. God of war.
Exactly. But now, Philo says, those same eyes just bend, now turn, the office and devotion of their view upon a tawny front.
Meaning Cleopatra.
Right. The legendary captain's heart has become nothing but the bellows in the fan to cool a gypsy's lust.
The resentment there is just palpable. These hardened veterans are standing there watching their invincible commander turn into basically a lapdog.
It's pathetic to them.
And to emphasize the severity of this psychological decay, Shakespeare cuts back to Rome, where young Octavius Caesar is just raging about Antony's negligence.
Caesar's not happy.
Not at all. And Caesar delivers this vivid, brutal recounting of what Antony used to be capable of. It's a description of ultimate stoic endurance.
Yeah. Caesar is the ultimate pragmatist, and he is deeply offended by Antony's current softness because he knows Antony's history.
He knows what he's capable of.
Exactly. Caesar recounts this military campaign in the Alps where Antony was beaten and starving. Caesar says that famine followed Antony, but Antony fought against it with patience greater than savages could muster.
Which is saying something for a Roman.
Huge! He describes how Antony drank the stale of horses, meaning horse urine, and ate the bark of trees.
Oh my God.
And he even ate strange flesh, which some did die to look on.
Wait, strange flesh? Like cannibalism? Or just horrific animal parts?
It's deliberately vague, but horrific enough that just looking at it killed people. And through all this unimaginable suffering, Caesar notes that Antony bore it so like a soldier that thy cheek so much as lanked not.
He ate flesh so horrific that people died just looking at it, and he didn't even lose weight in his cheeks.
He didn't even flinch.
It's an almost superhuman level of resilience. This is a man whose defining characteristic was his ability to assert his will over extreme physical suffering.
Right. He was an immovable object.
He was. And now, that same man is lounging on a silk couch, feeding grapes to Cleopatra, and just waving away urgent messengers from the Senate.
Let Roman Tiber melt.
Exactly. It is a catastrophic collapse of discipline. So to understand how an immovable object falls, we have to examine the unstoppable force that hit him.
We have to talk about Cleopatra.
Yes. We have to look at the gravitational anomaly that is Cleopatra.
Hazlitt's treatment of Cleopatra is really fascinating here because he refuses to reduce her to a mere trope.
She's not just a femme fatale.
No, she's not simply a seductress. Hazlitt describes her as a masterpiece of characterization. She is ostentatious, haughty, tyrannical, wildly unpredictable, and just overwhelmingly voluptuous.
She takes up all the oxygen in the room.
Exactly. Her power does not come from passive beauty. It comes from an active, aggressive curation of reality. Hazlitt boldly states that the sheer magnitude of her presence, the absolute theatricality of her existence, almost justifies Antony's infatuation.
Okay, saying it almost justifies the destruction of the Roman Republic is an incredibly heavy claim.
It's a huge claim.
But then you look at how she is introduced into Antony's life, and you start to see the mechanics of her power, like the famous description of her barge on the river Cydnus.
Oh, delivered by Enobarbus?
Yes, Enobarbus, who is Antony's friend, is a masterclass in sensory manipulation. Enobarbus says the barge she sat in was like a burnished throne burned on the water.
That paradox.
Just that paradox alone, a throne burning on the water, it sets the tone. It is unnatural, defies the elements.
And Enobarbus meticulously catalogs the sensory assault. Like, the poop deck was beaten gold, the sails were purple, which, is the color of royalty and immense expense.
Very expensive dye back then.
Exactly. The oars were silver, and they rode in time to the music of flutes. But Cleopatra doesn't just dominate the visual and auditory space. She alters the very air.
Right.
Enobarbus describes how a strange, invisible perfume hits the sense of the adjacent wharfs. She outpictures Venus herself.
Wow.
What Hazlitt recognizes here is that Cleopatra isn't just a woman to Antony. She is an entirely new dimension of experience.
A completely different reality.
Yeah, she is an escape from the brutal, bark-eating, horse urine-drinking reality of Rome.
I mean, when you put it like that, who wouldn't want to get on that barge?
Exactly.
But of course, the geopolitical reality does not care about his sensory awakening. The trap snaps shut on Antony pretty quickly.
It always does.
His wife in Rome, Fulvia, who had actually been independently raising armies and causing all sorts of chaos, suddenly dies.
Very inconveniently.
Right. And simultaneously, the pirate Pompey is amassing a fleet and threatening to blockade Rome. So Antony's prefrontal cortex finally boots up.
The alarm bells are ringing.
Yeah, he realizes he has to physically tear himself away from this enchanting queen and return to the center of power. And when he gets to Rome, in order to cement a fragile peace with Caesar, Antony is maneuvered into a political marriage.
Right, with Caesar's sister, Octavia.
Exactly.
And this is the architectural linchpin of the tragedy.
Why is that?
Because Octavia represents everything Cleopatra is not. She is Rome incarnate in a woman.
Oh, wow.
Enobarbus, who basically serves as the play's cynical truth-teller, describes Octavia's nature as being of a holy, cold, and still conversation.
Holy, cold, and still.
Right. She is pious, loyal, and utterly devoid of drama.
Which means Antony is trapped in an impossible binary.
Completely trapped.
If he stays with his new, cold Roman wife, he secures his political future. He avoids a global civil war, but he subjects himself to a life of emotional starvation.
He loses his Egypt.
He loses Egypt. But if he returns to the infinite variety of Cleopatra, he feeds his soul but guarantees a catastrophic war with Caesar.
It's a lose-lose, basically.
What fascinates me about this is how Shakespeare takes a very common, almost mundane human failing, infidelity or neglecting responsibilities for a new romance, and he scales it up to apocalyptic proportions.
That scaling is precisely why the play resonates so deeply.
Because it's relatable, even at that scale.
Exactly. Shakespeare understands that the architecture of human ruin is fractal. The exact same cognitive distortions, the same justifications, and the same ego-driven blunders that cause, a middle manager to blow up their career in a suburban office, they are the identical mechanisms that toppled the Roman triumvirate.
That is so true. The stakes are wildly different, but the internal pathology is exactly the same.
100%.
So that brings us to where the psychological decay actually manifests into catastrophic external action.
Yeah.
Let's translate this ancient context into the reality of modern decision-making.
Let's do it.
Because I look at this next phase of the narrative as the ultimate lesson in strategic self-destruction. The war inevitably breaks out between Antony and Caesar, and we arrive at the Battle of Actium.
Actium. The Battle of Actium is the hinge upon which the entire world pivots. And it's entirely determined by a flawed psychological compromise.
Completely flawed. Because look at the facts. Antony is the greatest land commander of his generation.
Unmatched.
Right. His entire identity, his legendary status, is built on leading heavy infantry across solid ground. But when a conflict with Caesar comes to a head, Antony decides to fight a naval battle.
Which makes no sense.
None. Why does he do it? Because Cleopatra possesses a massive fleet of 60 Egyptian galleys, and she desires to fight at sea.
Right.
There is this deeply painful scene where a veteran Roman soldier, covered in the scars of Antony's past victories, approaches his commander and literally begs him to reconsider.
Oh, this scene hurts to read.
It does. He points to his wounds and says, "O noble emperor, do not fight by sea. Trust not to rotten planks. We've used to conquer standing on the earth and fighting foot to foot."
Trust not to rotten planks. Man, it is a profound metaphor for abandoning one's core competency. Antony is taking his proven expertise, his firm foundation, and he's trading it for the hazard and instability of the ocean simply to appease the ego of his partner.
It's madness.
He ignores the tactical reality and just blindly repeats, "By sea, by sea."
Yeah.
His rationality is entirely eclipsed by his desire to remain enmeshed with Cleopatra's resources and her will.
When I see this happen in the modern world, it is staggering how closely it mirrors Actium.
Really? How so?
You see brilliant leaders, entrepreneurs, or even individuals in their personal lives who have built incredible success on a very specific foundation of skills. They're solid earth, right?
Right.
And then usually under the influence of a toxic partner or a narcissistic board member or just their own hubris, they abandon what they know.
They step onto the boats.
They step onto rotten planks. They decide to fight a battle in an arena they don't understand at all, just to prove a point or to appease someone else's vanity.
And because they are fighting on an unstable foundation, the moment pressure is applied, the entire structure collapses.
Which leads us to the climax of the battle.
Right. During the naval engagement at Actium, the noise and the chaos completely overwhelm Cleopatra.
She's not a soldier.
Exactly. She panics, orders her 60 ships to hoist their sails, and she flees the battle.
Just turns and runs.
She runs. And Antony, the man who once survived the Alps, the triple pillar of the world, he sees her leaving.
Yeah.
And what does he do? He abandons his fleet, abandons his loyal soldiers who are literally dying for him, turns his ship around, and follows her.
He just follows her. Hazlitt highlights this specific humiliating choice. He notes that Antony leaves the battle and, like a doting mallard, follows her flying sails.
A doting mallard.
I love that Hazlitt uses the term doting mallard. It completely strips Antony of his mythological status.
Takes him right off the pedestal.
Yeah. He is no longer Mars, the god of war. He is just a lovesick duck mindlessly following its mate across a pond. It is the absolute evaporation of professional duty.
The concept of the doting mallard syndrome is deeply tied to the sunk cost fallacy and cognitive dissonance.
How do you mean?
Well, Antony has sacrificed his reputation, his Roman wife, his political standing, all of it, to be with Cleopatra. If he lets her sail away and stays to fight the battle, he has to face the reality of what he has lost.
Oh, wow.
Right. By following her, he maintains the delusion that their union is worth the cost of the world.
That is so dark.
And Shakespeare provides us with a profound analysis of this cognitive collapse through the character of Enobarbus.
Yes, Enobarbus watches his commander abandon the fleet, and it just shatters his worldview. But instead of just calling Antony a coward, Enobarbus diagnoses the underlying psychological decay.
He gets right to the root of it.
He says, I see men's judgments are a parcel of their fortunes, and things outward do draw the inward quality after them to suffer all alike.
It is an incredibly modern psychological insight.
Yeah.
Men's judgments are a parcel of their fortunes. Enobarbus recognizes that rationality is not a fixed, immutable trait. Our ability to make sound decisions is directly tethered to our external circumstances.
That's scary to think about.
It is. When our fortunes decline, when we begin to experience severe loss, our judgment degrades in tandem. The outward failure drags the inward cognitive quality down with it.
You see this constantly in behavioral economics and psychology.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about a poker player who takes a bad beat and loses a massive hand. Instead of stepping back, regulating their nervous system, and playing the next hand logically, they go on tilt.
Right, they go on tilt.
The external loss corrupts their internal judgment. They start making wild, irrational, desperate bets, trying to win it all back instantly.
And they lose everything.
Yes, Antony is the ultimate historical example of going on tilt. He loses the sea battle, and his immediate response is not a tactical retreat.
No, he does something ridiculous.
He challenges Caesar, who controls massive armies and fleets, to a one-on-one sword fight.
Precisely. It is an absurd, desperate challenge. And Enobarbus, watching this, simply remarks, Caesar, thou hast subdued his judgment too.
Wow.
Caesar didn't just defeat Antony's military, the defeat itself destroyed Antony's capacity for reason.
So if we look at the wreckage of Antony's life, the question becomes, how do we extract the wisdom here? How do we identify when we are setting ourselves up for an Actium in our own lives?
That's the practical application.
Right. It starts with looking at where we are choosing to wage our battles. If you are deeply frustrated, failing, or feeling overwhelmed in your career or relationship, you have to ask yourself, am I fighting on solid ground using my actual strengths and values? Or have I stepped onto someone else's rotten planks?
That's a great question to ask.
Are you engaging in office politics you don't understand just to impress a boss? Are you adopting a lifestyle you can't afford to keep up with a partner?
Right. Trying to fight a sea battle when you're an infantryman.
Exactly. Stepping back onto the earth requires a massive blow to the ego, because it means admitting you were wrong to get on the boat in the first place.
And an inflated ego will do everything in its power to avoid that admission.
It'll fight to the death to avoid it.
It will deflect, deny, and often turn to violence or rage to protect itself. And Shakespeare illustrates this defense mechanism perfectly in the aftermath of Actium.
Oh, the messenger scene.
Yes. Antony is back in Egypt, defeated and humiliated. He discovers a messenger from Caesar, a man named Phidias, kissing Cleopatra's hand.
And Antony goes completely feral. It is a deeply uncomfortable scene to read.
Very uncomfortable.
He orders his guards to seize this messenger, whip him mercilessly, and send him back to Caesar. He screams, "Whip him, fellows!" till like a boy you see him cringe his face.
It's brutal.
It is. He is inflicting maximum physical degradation on a man who is essentially just doing his job as an envoy.
Right. And on the surface, it looks like the arrogant cruelty of a tyrant punishing a subordinate, but Hazlitt's analysis cuts right through the surface behavior.
What does Hazlitt see?
Hazlitt points out that the man's low social standing is not the true catalyst for Antony's explosive rage. Hazlitt writes, "There is another feeling which lies deeper, though Antony's pride would not let him show it, except by his rage. He suspects the fellow to be Caesar's proxy."
Oh, that reframes the entire scene.
Totally.
Antony isn't enraged at Phidias the messenger. Antony is absolutely terrified that Cleopatra is preparing to abandon him.
Exactly.
He has lost his army, he has lost his empire, and now he suspects the one thing he sacrificed it all for is making back-channel deals with his conqueror.
It's his worst nightmare realizing itself.
But his ego cannot process the humiliation of being discarded by the woman he ruined his life for. So the terror metabolizes into displaced aggression.
Yeah.
He tortures an easy target to simulate a feeling of power and control that he's completely lost.
Displaced aggression is exactly the right term. When a person's core identity is threatened and they lack the self-awareness to process that fear, the psyche deploys rage as a defense mechanism.
Rage is a bodyguard.
Exactly. Rage acts as a bodyguard for fear. It is louder, it feels more powerful, and it forces others to deal with your anger rather than your vulnerability.
That dynamic is so prevalent in human relationships.
All the time.
When someone lashes out with disproportionate anger, screaming over a minor mistake, sending a blistering email over a small oversight, it is rarely about the immediate trigger.
It's almost never about the trigger.
So the reflection here is to look at our own moments of explosive anger. When we find ourselves demanding that someone be metaphorically whipped, we need to pause and ask the uncomfortable question. What deep underlying insecurity am I trying to protect right now?
What am I afraid of?
What am I actually afraid of losing? Because until you address the fear, the rage will just keep seeking new messengers to punish.
And staying in an environment dominated by that kind of unpredictable, fear-driven rage has a profound cost on those around the leader.
It burns everybody out.
It really does. Which brings us to the tragedy of Enobarbus. Hazlitt actually considers this the most affecting part of the play.
It is heartbreaking.
Enobarbus has been Antony's anchor to reality this whole time. But after witnessing the disaster at Actium and the paranoid whipping of the messenger, Enobarbus reaches a breaking point.
You can't do it anymore.
He observes that when valor preys on reason, it eats the sword it fights with.
It eats the sword it fights with. Courage without logic is just self-cannibalization.
Perfect way to put it.
Enobarbus realizes that remaining loyal to a man who has lost his mind is no longer honorable. It's just suicidal. He makes the deeply rational Roman calculation to defect to Caesar's camp.
He leaves the sinking ship.
He leaves.
It is the objectively correct strategic move. But, as we know, human beings are not just strategic machines.
Right.
When Antony discovers that his oldest friend has defected, he doesn't react with the rage he showed the messenger.
Which is surprising.
It is. Instead, in a sudden flash of his former nobility, Antony orders that all of Enobarbus's treasure and belongings be sent after him, along with gentle greetings.
And that act of grace is what kills Enobarbus.
It destroys him.
It completely shatters him. He receives his treasure in Caesar's camp, and the guilt is unbearable. He realizes he has abandoned a man who, despite his immense flaws, still loved him.
Yeah.
Enobarbus wanders out into the night, calls himself a master leaver and a fugitive, and literally dies of a broken heart.
It perfectly illustrates the agonizing tension of the loyalty check. The rational choice preserved his life but destroyed his soul.
That is a terrible bind to be in.
It asks us to consider how we navigate our own loyalties to flawed institutions, toxic leaders, or self-destructive friends. When is it time to preserve your own integrity and leave?
Yeah.
And how do you manage the inevitable grief of severing a bond that once defined you? There is no clean exit in these scenarios.
There isn't. But, if the destruction is so total, if it costs you your empire, your best friend, and your sanity, why is the path that Antony chose so universally tempting?
Why do we keep doing it?
Yeah. Why do we constantly struggle against the rational choices in our lives? I think we have to address the sheer seductive power of the obstacles to our own growth.
Mm-hmm.
We resist the logical Roman path because passion, in its purest form, feels like transcendence.
It feels like magic.
It does. Listen to the language Antony uses. Early on, when a messenger tries to give him news from Rome, he embraces Cleopatra and says, "Let Rome and Tiber melt, and the wide arch of the ranged empire fall. Here is my space. Kingdoms are clay. The nobleness of life is to do thus."
It is intoxicating rhetoric. It is the allure of the absolute. We are drawn to narratives that suggest love can conquer all material reality, that passion is the ultimate justification for existence.
It's the ultimate romantic ideal.
Antony's essentially saying that the entire geopolitical structure of the world is just dirt. Kingdoms are clay. compared to the electrical charge of this romance.
Yeah.
But Shakespeare is exposing the danger of what we might call the infinite variety trap.
Yes, the infinite variety. This is the core of the addiction.
It is.
When someone asks Enobarbus if Antony will ever truly leave Cleopatra, Enobarbus says, never. He will not. Age cannot wither her, nor custom stale her infinite variety. Other women cloy the appetites they feed, but she makes hungry where most she satisfies.
Man, that final line is a perfect clinical description of an addictive cycle.
She makes hungry where most she satisfies.
In a healthy dynamic, satisfaction leads to satiation and peace. You eat a good meal, you're full. But Cleopatra operates on a system of intermittent reinforcement.
She is deliberately unpredictable.
Highly deliberate. She sends messages that she loves him, then immediately sends messages that she hates him. She creates a constant churning cycle of craving, temporary relief, and renewed anxiety.
It's the exact same mechanism that makes slot machines or doom scrolling so addictive.
100%.
The unpredictability spikes the dopamine. We become chemically addicted to the chaos. She is drama incarnate, and this perfectly explains why modern people often deeply resist the path of Octavia.
Because Octavia is safe.
Right. Remember, Octavia is the safe, logical, politically advantageous wife. But Enobarbus described her as cold and still.
And human nature has a profound aversion to boredom.
We hate it.
We do. We often prefer a painful, chaotic stimulus over a lack of stimulus. The stability of an Octavia or, the stability of a steady, reliable career or a peaceful daily routine can feel like a kind of death to a mind that has been conditioned by the extreme highs and lows of an Egyptian existence.
We sabotage our own peace because we mistake adrenaline for vitality.
We think panic is passion.
Exactly. It's like a person who chooses to invest all their money in a highly volatile, completely chaotic startup that might go bankrupt tomorrow over a steady, guaranteed index fund. Simply because the anxiety of watching the stock ticker makes them feel alive.
We crave the infinite variety.
Even when we know it is actively eroding our foundation.
Which is why it requires us to exercise extreme discernment when we consume this text, or when we evaluate the narratives we tell ourselves about our own lives.
We have to be careful.
We do, because Hazlitt is a romantic at heart, and he is deeply swept up in the aesthetic beauty of the play's conclusion. He suggests that Cleopatra's immense and unpardonable faults are almost redeemed by the beauty of her death.
Okay, and this is where I have to step in and strongly disagree with Hazlitt's romanticization here.
You're not buying it.
I am not buying. Look, Shakespeare's poetry is undeniably gorgeous here. When Cleopatra decides to commit suicide, she procures a venomous snake, an asp.
Right.
She applies it to her breast and speaks these incredibly tender maternal lines to the instrument of her death. She says, "Dost thou not see my baby at my breast that sucks the nurse asleep?"
It's a striking image.
It is beautiful poetry, and Hazlitt views this as a triumphant preservation of her queen-like state. He says she tastes a luxury in death. But if we look at the mechanics of why she is dying, the nobility totally evaporates.
Well, it is essential to look at the immediate catalyst for her suicide.
Exactly.
She does not kill herself immediately upon hearing of Antony's death out of pure transcendent grief.
Yeah.
She negotiates with Caesar. She tries to secure a deal. It is only when she realizes that Caesar intends to take her back to Rome as a prisoner to be paraded in his triumph that she chooses death.
Exactly. She tells her maid exactly what she's afraid of. She envisions the humiliating spectacle in Rome. She says she will be mocked by comedians, and worst of all, she will see some squeaking Cleopatra boy, my greatness, the posture of a whore.
The boy actors in the Roman theater.
Yes, she is terrified of a boy actor in a cheap Roman theater mocking her legacy. Her suicide is not a Romeo and Juliet sacrifice for love. It is a calculated final act of vanity.
It's brand management.
It's PR.
Yeah.
She is preserving her brand. She refuses to be a spectacle for the Roman plebeians. To call that a beautiful redemption feels like falling for her manipulation all over again.
And if we contrast her highly curated theatrical death with Antony's death, the reality of their enmeshment becomes even more grim.
Antony's death is just sad.
It really is. Antony receives false word that Cleopatra has killed herself, so he decides he must follow her into death. But the man who once commanded legions and survived the Alps cannot even manage to end his own life properly.
Which is saying something for a Roman general.
Right. He turns to his servant, Eros, and orders him to strike the fatal blow.
It is the ultimate abdication of agency. He can't even do it himself.
And Eros, who is deeply loyal to the end, draws his sword. But instead of killing his commander, Eros turns the blade on himself and commits suicide to avoid the trauma of killing his master.
Oh, man.
So Antony is left standing there, looking at his dead servant, saying, "Thou teachest me, O valiant Eros, what I should and thou couldst not."
It's so shameful.
Antony then attempts to fall on his own sword, but he botches it.
He misses.
He misses the vital organs. He doesn't die a swift, noble Roman death. He is left bleeding out on the floor in agony, begging his own guards to finish him off, and they refuse.
They just walk away.
Yeah. He has to be awkwardly hoisted up into Cleopatra's monument to die in her arms. It is a messy, agonizing, deeply pathetic end for the god of war.
The discernment we need to extract here is a severe caution against losing your center of gravity. Antony allowed his entire identity, his judgment, and his will to be consumed by another person and another paradigm.
He gave it all away.
He became so enmeshed that he lost the capacity to even execute his own final exit with dignity. We can marvel at Shakespeare's breathtaking ability to render their defiance in poetry without for a second endorsing the narcissism and the self-destruction that drove it.
Which brings us to a fascinating comparative insight, especially when we look at the surviving victor.
Caesar.
Right. If this text is an exploration of pure rationality versus pure emotion, we have to look at the fate of Caesar, the avatar of Rome.
The ultimate prefrontal cortex.
Exactly. Caesar operates purely on logic, strategy, and calculation, and he wins the world. But his reaction to Antony's death reveals the tragedy of the extremes.
Because when Caesar is brought the sword stain with Antony's blood, he doesn't celebrate. No.
He doesn't hold a victory parade. He breaks down and weeps.
It's a genuine shock to his system.
And his lamentation is incredibly moving. He says, "Oh, Antony, I have followed thee to this, but yet let me lament, with tears as sovereign as the blood of hearts, that thou, my brother, my competitor, in top of all design, my maiden empire, friend and companion in the front of war."
He calls him his brother, his maiden empire.
Yeah.
Caesar recognizes in that moment of absolute victory that his own identity was defined by his opposition to Antony.
They needed each other.
They did. A world governed solely by the cold, calculating logic of Caesar is safe, but it is sterile. It lacks the vitality, the color, and the terrifying beauty of the Egyptian barge.
Right.
But conversely, a world governed only by the unrestrained passion of Antony and Cleopatra is vibrant, but it inevitably burns itself to ash.
So you lead both.
The human experience requires the tension of both. It requires the prefrontal cortex to build the ship and the limbic system to desire the horizon. Wow, that tension is exactly why this narrative endures. Caesar's advisor, Maecenas, watches Caesar weep over his fallen rival and makes a profound observation. He says, when such a spacious mirror is set before him, he needs must see himself.
A spacious mirror.
A spacious mirror.
That is precisely what Shakespeare has constructed and what Hazlitt has helped us polish. By observing the spectacular global-scale rise and fall of these titans, we are forced to look at the reflection of our own frailties.
We see ourselves in them.
We see our own capacity for Actium traps, our own susceptibility to infinite variety, and the terrifying fragility of our own judgment when the winds of fortune shift.
Antony died because he convinced himself that his passion for Egypt was larger than the world itself. He let his vision become clouded until his entire life dislimned and unpainted itself like a dragonish cloud fading into the sky.
It's a powerful warning.
It really is. So as we close this session, I want to leave you with a question to carry into your own reflections. Take a hard look at the landscape of your life right now. What is your Egypt? What beautiful, intoxicating distraction, what chaotic relationship, or what ego-driven ambition is quietly asking you to let the Rome of your own life melt away?
That's the question we all have to answer.
That's the heart of this section. This is Wisdom for the Present, where understanding leads to clarity, and clarity shapes how we see and live. We'll see you in the next episode.